7, 1 through 4. Now, we see in the earlier chapter how Stephen gets accused, and this is kind of the continuation of the trial. It kind of, at the time the scripture was written, verses and chapters weren't put in, so this was kind of put in later. Luke, when he wrote this, probably wouldn't have stopped it till after the trial, so it's kind of weird. One of them cases where the divisions of scripture is kind of a little weird because it kind of stops in the middle of the story here. Because it's kind of in the middle of the conversation too. We see him talking, and then we see. Then the high priest asked him, "Are these accusations true?" Out of all the things they did in this trial, this is one of the things they were supposed to do. They were supposed to ask him for his account. Sometimes, because there could have been an explanation about it, and if there's a legitimate explanation, like for a case of a murder, if he was being attacked, that would have been cause for him to seek refuge until they determined themselves what actually happened. So they had a legit to speak for themselves. And of course, we see earlier in the other chapter, those that accused him told lies against him. This was Stephen's lengthy reply. The glorious God appeared to our ancestor Abraham before he moved in Mesopotamia, before he moved to Haran. And so we see this in Genesis. This is a story they all would have been familiar with, how Abraham picked up and left. And them all being descended from Abraham, they would have known this story. And they told him, this is God telling him, to leave his native land, to say goodbye to his relatives, and to set out for a country that God would direct him. So God asked him to leave, but didn't tell him where he's going to go. God asked him to leave everything he knew and completely trust in him. God asked him to commit to him. You know, Abraham, we see how Israelites feel entitled later on. They get a pride about who they are. At that time, Abraham was just a man. Just somebody who had faith in God. We see with Job, which would have been around the same time, based on the cities mentioned, how Job had a faith in God. But God didn't choose Job to make a great nation out of him. God chose Abraham to make the great nation out of. We see later on how the Israelites are prideful because they're Israelites. Well, Abraham was just somebody who had faith in God and was willing to go, leave everything he knew to follow God, not knowing where exactly he was going to be led, just knowing that the one who made him, the one he served, was going to be the one to take him there. You know, oftentimes we ain't willing to take them leaps of faith to where we're able to journey out. This story that he's talking about is found in Genesis 12, the call of Abraham. So we see how he's willing to make that. We look how the church and the Pharisees system set up. They didn't do anything out of faith. They were very legalistic. They followed the law not because they wanted to please the Lord, not out of faith, but because they got a pride from themselves from following the law. Other people noticed them because they followed the law. Abraham didn't leave his land to be noticed. Abraham left the land because God led him to leave his land. Mesopotamia at the time was at its highest. It was kind of the center of the empire at the time. This would have been later after Babel. Babel fell, but still the area in itself was rich because of the two rivers. So it still would have been a highly populated area. In fact, it is one of the earliest kingdoms in the time was there. One of the most uh, ancient records we have is from Mesopotamia area. So it shows that the fact that we found something shows that it was distinct and it was probably big. The fact that they could actually write shows that they had developed some. So it was a big deal for him to leave the center of culture to go somewhere where he didn't know. We kind of see different when Moses leads the people back, because Moses knows where the people is going to go back to. Moses knows that's what the land they've been given. Abraham just knows there's a land he's being given. He just got to go be willing to find it. Also, when Abraham arrives, there's people in that land. So that occurs a problem too. And Abraham only owns one piece of property the whole time he's alive, and that's the tomb. And he buries Sarah in. So he left the land of the Chaldeans and lived in Haran until his father died. Then God brought him here to the land of Israel. Now, at the point in time, it wasn't known as Israel, it was Canaan. But God allowed him to bury his dad before he left. God knows that in this life he blesses us with things, and certain things that he blesses us with we'll have to spend time caring for and tending to. The family is one of the main things that he don't want us to neglect our family. He just don't want our family to come before him. This is shown when Abraham puts Isaac up for sacrifice. It shows that, yes, Abraham cares for his family, but he cares for God more. So we see that happening. One could argue, well, God stopped leading him to the land because of this. If God would have kept leading him, he would have left his dad behind. But God understood that he needed to care for his dad, so he didn't continue caring for him. Also, his dad was kind of coming along for the journey because he moved to this place out of where they were at. So we see how his dad may have been trying to make the trip with him, but he was too sick and ill, maybe, which would have caused his death. So then God talks back to Abraham and tells him he needs to move again. The fact is, sometimes we can allow things in this life to burden us down to where we don't serve. And some of these blessings can stop us. But eventually we're going to have to be like Abraham and go where God leads us. We're going to have to not let them blessings keep us from going where he's leading us. And oftentimes that's exactly how we do it. We allow them blessings to stop us from God using us. We don't actually necessarily put them before God. They're just hindering us from being all we can be for God. Abraham possibly could have went to the land earlier, but he had to tend to the family, which God expected, but he still could have left. But he would end up going to the land, and God worked it out for his good, all that happened. God wanted him to leave his family, and he saw the bond there, so God took his family. Sometimes if we put the blessings and focus so much on them, God will take them away to make us where we're able to be.